Yeah, I've kind of been asking myself the question, what does it look like for transformation to happen in my life? Or what does it look like for good to overcome evil? And largely, what does it look like to be refathered by the good Heavenly Father? And so this is kind of my story. I grew up, my father was someone who ingrained in us the core value of being smart. Like intellect was, if you were smart, that made you more valuable, right? And so an example is he taught me to play chess when I was 6 years old, right? So, he taught me even more when getting his horrific reaction and response to when his 6-year-old son actually beat him in chess, right? So I took all of these messages and I poured them into an engineering career, software engineering for 24 years, right? And even the last 4 years, I had the opportunity to work with the latest and greatest technologies, whether it was artificial intelligence or big data or machine learning, all those fun things to work on that engineers like to work on. And so a project came up that hit all those skills. So I was super confident. I was ready. I did 3 different prototypes, and I took all this information and I presented it. I made a recommendation, and it did have some, unfortunately, pride and attitude and entitlement. I was the smart guy on the team, right? And so you can imagine a little bit with that attitude. Didn't necessarily come across as what was best to the manager. And in fact, he actually chose something that I didn't recommend. And that's where things got really sticky for me. I was threatened. From a family perspective, if this was not happening, am I going to be able to provide for my family? What's going to happen in my career if I can't take all this information and all that I've learned and put it in a direction that has influence? But mostly, it hit me at the core of my intellect. I was not the person who gave the best and smartest, solution to something. So it had a number of negative impacts, as you can imagine, because I recognize it as sin in my heart. So with this in mind, what ended up happening was sleep was replaced with insomnia, and peace in my heart was replaced with anxiety. I was consumed by the strategies that I had to put things back on the right track. So even at the dinner table, I was unable to hear my daughters and my wife sometimes saying something, asking questions, making comments, telling me about their day. Was really robbing from the whole family. And even worse, I was marginalized in my team. I was cut out of meetings, and even the meetings I was in, was really strained. So at that point, I began to really loathe, what was in my heart, what the sin and the impacts that it had. So I asked the Lord. I knew, Lord, I need you to transform my heart. And I prayed a very simple prayer. I prayed, Lord, have mercy. With that prayer, he responded, as such a good father does. He said, seek the good for your team. He said, respect and submit to your manager. Does that sound like Romans 13, right? He said, love your manager. He said, love your teammates. Not only love them, but do it with a sincere and genuine heart. And finally, he also said, leave your reward, if there's any injustice that happens to it, leave that to me. I'll take care of that at the right time. It's similar to Romans 12:14, where he says, bless those who persecute you and bless, do not curse them. I realized after Romans 12:9-21, that's exactly what God has done for us. I realized that he sent his son to die on a cross, paying a debt that I could never pay in all of eternity. I realized that I was his enemy. I was shaking my fist at him. I wanted to do things my own way, apart from him. But he died for me when I was in that place. So now that he did that, now that he was resurrected, now that I'm justified, now that God the Father looks at me as perfect, he looks at me and he sees the Son, now I have a simple job. When I go to work each day, I ask God the Father, what do you want me to do today? Or in a specific situation where I'm starting to feel anxiety, how do you want me to respond to this? I don't have to control the situation that's uncontrollable with my boss anymore. One of the best parts is that the bad dad jokes, they're back at the dinner table. So God overcame evil in my heart with his goodness and mercy. Every once in a while, I'll slip back into, Silicon Valley comparison mode, or having the intellect, be associated or tied to my heart and what my value is. But God's good. He has given me amazing things to combat that. My small group on Wednesday night. Corey, guys, thank you so much for your prayer and encouragement every Wednesday night. But mostly, I just pray, Lord, have mercy. And that's what transformation looks like in my heart. Yeah. I mean, this verse, Romans 12:1 and 2, speaks to me on how someone is transformed. And Paul obviously follows it up with some examples. This is Romans 12:1 and 2. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect.